Men don't cry. Women cry. Children cry. But men do not cry. No cry, especially during movies. Or at least that's what I thought. As a wee lad, I cried during all sorts of films. Lion King, Bambi, Babe, Hook, Marley and Me, The Fox and the Hound. I mean, the list could go on and on. I was what some might describe as a cry baby. Then I got a little bit older and quickly evolved into an angsty scene kid teenager, which is completely different from an emo kid because we never cried. MySpace fame was hitting hard. I was super edgy, watching films like Requiem for a Dream and Trainspotting and Fight Club and Candy. Still no tears. Fast forward a few years. It's just before the holidays. The year is 2017. I'm sitting my sweet ass in a very quiet and weirdly empty movie theater alone watching one of the best movies I've seen in years. Ryan Gosling isn't doing so hot, and I sense we're approaching the end of the film. Suddenly, I feel an unfamiliar sensation coming over me. Or at least one I haven't felt in years. What the hell is this coming out of my eyes? I try to dial it back, but it's too late. I'm too disoriented. I panic and look around to make sure no one is around to witness whatever the hell is happening to my body. I'm still alone. Oh God, why am I so alone? Water starts leaking out of my eye sockets. I'm not crying, you're crying! I yell at absolutely no one. Wait. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's back it up. It's a little early in the video to be talking about a grown man crying in a movie theater alone. Instead, we'll start today with taking a look at a character who showcases what it really means to be a hero. Then we'll discuss why his story might cause a man sitting alone in a movie theater in 2017 to shed a tear or two. And end with why this specific type of hero is so incredibly relatable. What character am I talking about? What? No, come on. Drive? How obvious would that have been? I hate to break it to you, but you ain't that guy. No, the film for today is Blade Runner 2049, and the character that made us cry alone in the local AMC nearly a decade ago was Kay. Kay is the embodiment of the average American working class fella. He does his job and he does it well. Never really asks a lot of questions or even thinks to ask any questions. Just cashes checks and breaks some necks. More the latter than the former, as he can barely afford a dumpy ass apartment where most of his neighbors hate him and he lives alone other than his AI girlfriend. Sound familiar? Now, for being honest, this is a pretty sweet arrangement, aside from the last part about neighbor hate and a shitty apartment. But ignorance is bliss, and there's something to be said about a fellow who puts his head down and works, settling down at night beside his AI gal with a whiskey in hand, accepting that his life is just a series of hit jobs. Never really thinking about how shitty his job is or worrying about life in general. For context, if you're not American, most of the American working class are hitmen and women, like Kay. I'm serious, don't look it up. Unfortunately, remaining in blissful ignorance at the workplace doesn't tend to be the reality. According to a collaborative study that was spearheaded by Jobs for the Future in 2025, a random sample of 18,429 US adults aged 18 to 75 were asked a series of questions regarding their jobs, and 60% of which were determined to be dissatisfied with their jobs. If you want to check out the study, I'll leave a link in the description down below. To be aware that you're dissatisfied to me is a strong indication questions are being asked. Most hunger for more of a purpose than what they're getting, but it just takes a nudge, usually a shove in the right direction, for it to go from an underlying curiosity and evolve into a stronger pursuit. In Kay's case, this moment occurred while in the midst of retiring a fellow replicant. What should have been another job shoved him into asking more questions about his purpose. But like most new awakenings, ego is to follow. Kay acquires a new name, a more human name. Joe.
All right.
Joe begins his self-discovery journey. Yes, Queen! During this self-discovery journey, Joe not only tries to deny what he's discovering, but even misinterprets his purpose. Joe at one point believes he's special, the first of his kind, perhaps even the chosen one. Born naturally from another replicant rather than created in a lab. His greater purpose being to represent a new future and the possibility of genuine human connection between replicants and humans, challenging the boundaries of identity and what it means to be human. What greater purpose is there than that? I mean, you're legit the poster child for your people, and the next stage in evolution as a whole. But sad face for Joe. Shortly after he thinks he's discovered his purpose, it turns out he's not as muy importante as he thought. Joe is not the first of his kind. He's just like any other replicant, except worse, because now, with all those dirty little questions he's been asking, he's for sure in a bunch of trouble.
Time is a flat circle.
And just like real life, when it rains, it pours. Joe loses everything. His job, his AI girlfriend and fleshlight, probably his apartment, and, well, that's kind of it. He didn't really have a lot going on for him, other than being kind of a badass who, up until recently, liked to take out his own kind. You can't really hold that last part too much against him, you know? I mean, talk about a tough break. But sometimes, between rocks and hard places, something beautiful can grow. Alright, so life is over for our boy. He's depressed. No girl, no job, no car, no nothing. Hashtag relatable. But then he's given a second chance.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
In Gladiator, when Maximus is willing to die to avenge his family and free Rome of Commodus's tyranny. In Logan, when Wolverine is willing to die to protect a young girl from the same life he had. In V for Vendetta, when V is willing to die to free the people of the UK. Or when Derek is willing to die to reveal Magnum to the world and protect the Prime Minister of Malaysia and Zoolander.
Excuse me.
Each of these is an example of someone in pursuit of something greater than themselves and the willingness to give up their life in order to achieve it. Heroism in its simplest form, particularly the last example.
I can't turn left. Yeah, right.
When this is on screen, it provokes. It brings a tear to our eye. Not because we're crybabies, well, actually maybe a little because of that, but because deep down inside, if we were put to the same task, we want to believe we'd be capable of doing the same. There's a quote by the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl that goes, "Man's search for meaning is the primary motivation in his life, and not a secondary rationalization of instinctual drives. The meaning is unique and specific in that it must and can be fulfilled by him alone. Only then does it achieve a significance which will satisfy his own will to meaning." Finding purpose is a pretty damn solo experience. There can be outside signs from people, places, and things, but no one can tell us what our purpose is. Joe thought he'd found his purpose when he assumed he was the chosen one. Then, after discovering the actual chosen one was another, Joe nearly found himself heading down the wrong path when being told by someone else what his purpose was. How many times in life have you found yourself thinking you're on the right path only to discover you were wrong? Or listening to the advice of someone you don't know about what your path is. Or worse, listening to the advice of a mentor even though you know you're meant for something else. Gladiator is a great film because its simplicity of a man pursuing what needs to be done is so straightforward, and his choice is rewarded with an arena to witness his success and the opportunity to join his loved ones in the afterlife. Some folks are fortunate enough to have such a pure sense of purpose, but I would argue most grapple with the lack of clarity. What makes Blade Runner 2049 a great film is the relatability of the guidelines not being so clear. Joe is required to look inside to determine what the right action is, knowing it will be a journey done alone, and he will likely be forgotten, with no loved ones waiting for him to arrive. The right decision, Joe's purpose, was to be the forgotten bridge that connected two more important characters together. I recognize that this is a strange thing to say considering he actually is the main character in the movie, but in terms of his importance to the world, it turns out he's just a cog in the wheel, but it doesn't negate his importance, because even that wheel needs his cog in order to function. Okay, so here's the thing. I might be alone in this whole tearing up at Joe's decision to take the less memorable road, but I get the vibe that I'm not, especially with how many freaking Blade Runner 2049 hype videos there are on YouTube. That said, I'm going to be speaking for myself moving forward. Joe's choices leading up to the end of the movie to sacrifice himself silently hits hard because most of real life revolves around making similar decisions. When a neighbor buys a full load of groceries for the family down the street that's barely getting by, or someone showing up at 3 a.m. to put their arm around a friend who just discovered their partner's been cheating on them, or a sister sneaking into her brother's room to hug him while he's crying without even knowing why because he's too scared to talk about it, or a mother going to a job she hates because she has to provide for her kids at home, or a father who has to bury his son but has to do his best to remain stable because he has 2 other children that don't have the life experience to do the same, or a child caretaking a parent alone who is suffering from dementia. There's no accolades for actions like these. No one is around around to give a high five or a pat on the back. And there's certainly not an arena full of people cheering for the action taken, but each one of them is a heroic act in their own right. The quiet decisions made in life don't really get the same recognition that overthrowing a tyrannical government might get. That doesn't negate their level of importance to the person receiving the gesture. Going back to Joe, if he'd become jaded by the loss he'd experienced, he would have missed out on what it means to be a human being. Instead, Joe chose to do what he knew was right, and as a result, he fulfilled his true purpose with no one to witness it. Well, that is, no one to witness it other than us. Life provides a lot of opportunities to become jaded and shut off from the pains that come along with it. I get it, this shit is hard, but in doing so, opportunity for purpose can be missed. Real life doesn't tend to include an audience, but we can use Joe's example of willingness to do what needs to be done regardless of who's around to see it. And with that, I'll keep shedding a tear for those that achieve their purpose, because while some men don't cry, real men do. This is Ian, signing off.